In this interview episode, you'll hear from an entrepreneur who started his podcast first as a creative outlet and then designed a business around it, which is a lot different from the other stories and experiences you've heard on Reaching Abundance so far. Andy Hill gets super transparent with us and shares not just last year's top-line revenue number, but what he actually took home as owner's pay in his business. And unlike those folks who work hardly any hours but don't tell you how they do it, Andy shares which processes and tasks he outsources in his business so that he can spend minimal time stuck in the office. Andy is widely known as a personal finance expert through the lens of being a very present husband and involved father of two. His show and his website, Marriage, Kids, and Money, is a great resource to learn about paying off debt, family budgeting, and building generational wealth. Stick around to hear how Andy's even helping other people's kids become millionaires. Andy, thank you so much for joining me today. I am really excited to chat with you.
Thank you, Virginia, for hosting me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So I want to hear your definition of abundance.
That's a good question. I would say for me right now, in the life that I'm living at 42 years old, I would say abundance for me is time freedom, the ability to craft and design my ideal day. And I really am enjoying that right now because as soon as I feel like I've gotten there, there's like these little tweaks that I can continue to make, whether they're, 1% improvements over time, and they really help to make me feel like I live an abundant life. So that's kind of where I am right now. And those types of things for me at my age are, family time, relaxation time, doing work that provides me a purpose, ikigai, that makes me feel like I'm doing something that's helpful, and my health, taking care of my health and making sure that I'm the best guy I could be.
The best dad you can be.
Yeah, work on it.
Yeah. Tell us how this time freedom concept and knowing that your family is at the forefront of importance for you. How do you design your days then? Like, what have you changed over time in running your business to give yourself this freedom?
Well, for so long, I worked in corporate America, and it was a lot of, at least 40 hours a week, sometimes 60, sometimes nights, sometimes weekends. And I did that for so long that I longed for something different. I'm like, surely I don't have to do this forever. And so with some financial changes that we were able to make in our lives, essentially saving a lot more than we had coming in, we utilized a lot of that money to ladder down to work that we do enjoy for both my wife and I. So now when you talk about designing your day, I used to think of work as the thing that consumes most of my hours throughout the week. And I'm trying to flip that script right now where, if you look at the general week, you work 5 days and you enjoy 2 of them, right? I'm like, why can't we flip that around, right? Why can't we flip that around to work 3 days and enjoy 4 of them? I'm not there yet, but I'm moving in a direction where I currently have a 4-day work week. I work 20 to 30 hours a week, my wife as well. And that's where I'm trying to limit my week as far as working. And then so I can go back to enjoying life and spending time with my kids and taking care of my health. So when I talk about designing my work week, right now I'm working Monday through Thursday. I try to limit that to, again, 20 to 30 hours a week. And I have a strict don't work on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday policy and avoid evenings and weekends and things like that. Now, it wasn't always like that. I used to work in corporate America, used to do a lot of hours, and I had a desire to get out of that. So I, on top of that, added a side hustle with a podcast and a coaching business and things like that. So I was maximizing work and minimizing life. And now I'm trying to flip that script.
And I find that's more common than not, that there's a period of hustle, for lack of a better word, that maybe you are still working corporate and you're starting your business, or even if you had the pleasure of quitting, but you're starting your business. I mean, it's just kind of natural to dive all in and build the thing and do all the hours and potentially work yourself a bit too much for a period of time before that switch flips and you're like, wait, this isn't what I want. This is, I built this business for myself and for my family to have some freedom. So let me like backtrack on my schedule a little bit. Can you walk us through the timeline and the process of how you made this work and, kind of take us from where you were to where you are now?
Sounds good. Yeah. So I'll take it back to, let's see, like 8 years ago. And I was working in corporate America. I had some young children, maybe 4 years old and 2 years old, and an awesome wife. And I was working a lot, and I was putting a lot of hours in. When I dedicate myself to things, I work really hard on them, and that was my job. And then one day I was at the office, and I got a call into my boss's office, and they said, "Hey, we've got some news. We're going to be moving you from this team to another team. All the clients that you've built up, as well as the team you've built, there are going to be moved off to other people, and you're going to be focusing on this." And I'm glad I didn't lose my job at the point, because I wasn't quite ready to say goodbye. But it was also one of those moments in time where I felt like, man, I really don't have any control of my life. And it made me sad that they didn't even talk to me beforehand to say, what do you think about this? Is this something you'd like to do? It was just sort of like, this decision is made for you. And I was like, man, I don't really have a lot of control here. And then when I go home, I've got a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. I don't have a lot of control here either. So I'm like, I need something. I need something that I have control over, that feels fun, and that, helps me flex like a creative muscle. And so I had been listening to podcasts at that time in my life, doing housework or going for a run and things like that. I'm like, oh, this is a cool medium. It helps me to do other things while I'm enjoying or learning. And so I'm like, I'm just going to start my own podcast. I think that could be fun, and it could be a nice outlet for me. I can connect with other families or connect with other experts out there who I want to learn from, and then I can share our journey along the way. And at that time, I'd been very interested in, family finance and family financial independence and topics like that. I'm like, okay, I'll share our journey. I'll learn from people. And that was in 2016. And so I started as a hobby. I really loved it. It was like, oh my God, I feel alive again. I'm lit up. I can connect with these people who are like me. And it was just so much fun. And I continued that hobby for a while. I figured out how to make a little bit of money from it when I was approached for podcast sponsorships, and people started asking me to coach them. And I'm like, okay, I can make some money through coaching. I can make some money through sponsorships. And from there, it just continued to grow as a side hustle until one day, 3 or 4 years later, my wife is like, man, you've been talking about this forever. Why don't you just go for it full time? We've done all these things financially to make this process easier. We had been saving up a bunch of money in a savings account to buy our first rental property, because that was my ticket out. I'm like, oh, I'm going to be a rental property guy, and I'll have all these houses, and that'll be my way out of corporate America. And as my wife and I started looking at rental properties and seeing all that went into it and landlording, we're both like, we don't want to do this. And so she said to me, she's like, why don't you just take that pile of money and let that be like your runway to doing your business full time? And I said, okay, if you're down with it, because I really don't want to do this corporate job anymore. And so I took the leap in January of 2020.
Okay.
Which, as you know, some things happened a few months after that.
Some audibles were called in the environment.
Some audibles were called, absolutely. But 4 years later, the business is going very well. It's grown over those years. There's been ups and downs. Entrepreneurship is a wild ride, or at least it has been for me, with revenue and, changes of environment and pivoting. But 4 years later, I am so happy I decided to make that leap. And I had done so many things to protect ourselves, and I'm glad that I did those things, but we never needed all of the protection that I thought we would need. So I even wish I started it sooner.
Ooh, okay. So a couple things strike me as interesting or funny in some ways. For one, you mentioned this concept of control, which I feel you. Like, I'm definitely someone who likes to at least feel like I'm in control, even if that's not the truth. But let's just be honest here. Like, entrepreneurship, do we actually have control? Like, we do to a certain extent, but we can't control our clients. We don't necessarily control who sees our marketing or who takes action on our marketing. There, there, I'm laughing because there are pieces of entrepreneurship, of every decision, right, that we make, that we started on this path of seeking control. And as you get further into it, you discover that you don't have as much as you thought.
I hear you. Yeah, I think there are things that you can do over time that I've learned that will help me feel more control. But I think psychologically, emotionally, maybe how I'm wired, I don't think I'll ever fully 100% let my guard down and say, I got this all taken care of in the bag. There are things that help me as an entrepreneur to feel more comfortable, like having a slush fund of money in a business bank account that if things go haywire, I'm good for, a few months or 6 months or whatever. That makes me feel good. Sticking to my schedules and saying this is the boundaries with which I will say yes or I say no, that makes me feel empowered. Things like that will help. But yes, to your point, I don't think I'm ever going to get to a point, or if somebody's considering taking the leap, like, okay, I'll do this when I have 100% control. I think that's fantasy as well.
Well, thank you for sharing a couple of things that help you feel more in control. I definitely agree with the slush fund and, creating boundaries around your time and your calendar. So that's awesome. The other piece that I thought was really interesting is that you actually started, we're going to call it audience building, before you intended to start a business. I think that's really cool. You didn't know it, but you were kind of doing it the quote unquote right way. So many people wait until they have an offer or a product or a plan on how exactly you're going to coach somebody and you're a certified whatever before you'll start the audience building process. And so I think that's kind of magical that you kind of did it backwards, but it's actually the right way to do it.
I appreciate you saying so. As somebody who's been learning to understand what business is for a while, I'm like, oh yeah, I need to sell something or provide a service or a product. That's why I'm not making any money. But hey, people like hanging out with me.
The beauty of that is that people already started to know, like, and trust you. So when you came out with something, you have an audience of people to present it to. Maybe they buy, maybe they don't, but at least you had that audience there. So many entrepreneurs are, like I said, so busy creating the product or the service and not audience building that when they launch, they have no one that they're launching to. And so, at least in my role as a podcast manager, I'm always encouraging people to start before they're ready. Go ahead and start speaking to people, even if you don't have a product quite for sale yet. We can refine that. So, would you walk us through this business building process for you? Like you said, you were chatting, you're having a good time, you're making friends online, and then, oh, I'm not making money because I need to sell something. Like, how did that work and how has that developed over the past few years?
I don't know if it's a right way or any way. It's just the way I did it. And in the beginning, it was just a passion of I want to connect with people. I want to have an outlet. I want to help people as well if I can, So it started from an opportunity just to make community. And so that was my goal for the first year or two, really. Like, is this something that I can passionately talk about for a long time without getting bored or annoyed or feel like this is also a job. Like, is this fun? Am I having fun doing this? I mean, it doesn't have to be fun for everybody. That's what I sought. I was like, hey, I want to do something that's fun, that's an outlet, that makes community. And I saw over time, people were gravitating toward that. People were connecting with me. And then as I was like, okay, how do I make this into something? Avenues started to pop up organically, really. Like, I didn't really think about podcast sponsorships until somebody came up to me and said, can I sponsor your podcast? I'm like, sure. They're like, how much do you charge? I'm like, I have no clue. Let me find out. Let me go talk to some people who do this and then learn from them. And in turn, that helped me create more community. And then people also wanted to connect based on the information I was sharing about coaching. And so that organically started to come my way. So I don't know. For me, it was like just the draw of trying to do something that I was passionate about and having a heart for helping led me into those avenues. And so over time, the coaching piece grew. The sponsorship piece grew as well. Other people approached me to say, love the content you're putting it out. Can you put out some content for me on my channel or my podcast or my blog? And I'm like, okay, so I'm good at creating content as well. Maybe that can be an avenue. So really today, those are the three ways that I make money with my business. I create content for other people's channels. I do coaching. And I have a lot of my content sponsored, or I have affiliate partners, just general advertising for things, products and services that I know, like, and trust. So that's how it grew. Very, very tiny in the beginning and a medium-sized today. Last year I made $200,000 in revenue. I was able to pay myself a salary of around $80,000 last year. I always try to I sometimes revenue can be, not have all the information. I like to talk about the money I'm able to pay myself, at the end of the day. Like, okay, how does that equate to what I used to make at a job, or is this enough for me and my family to live on? So last year I paid myself $80,000, and that's great based on what we need in our lives right now. We have no mortgage, we have no debt. We paid off all those a while ago, and then we've hit a level of coast fire where we don't have to invest anymore for our retirement because we front loaded it so much. So our expenses are pretty low. And so working part-time for myself and then my wife working part-time, we're making enough to enjoy our lives today.
Absolutely. Thank you for that transparency. And I want to highlight that absolutely, when we talk about top line revenue numbers, somebody can say, I had a 7-figure launch, but we have no idea how much they spent in ads and this and that.
Spent 7 figures, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like how much they're paying their team. There's so many other factors that come into play when somebody says like, oh, I'm a this or that, they're throwing out some figures, my business made $700,000 last year. And you're thinking like, but how much did you take home? That's the important piece. Then you even added to that and you were able to say, information about the other personal finance decisions that you've made, which if anybody does not listen to your show, they need to go hop over there. Because your show really does help families do exactly what you're doing. That's how you started. So having no debt, having no house payment, making these decisions in other areas of your life means that you don't necessarily have to create this monster of a business. You can be very happy taking home $80,000 and living like a king, right?
Yeah.
And just
absolutely
and enjoying life and having that time. So that goes into this piece of defining what's enough for you. And
yeah, I like that.
That enoughness oftentimes is also based on other financial pieces in our life. If we have a bunch of debt, well, I need $150,000 to bring home because I have all this stuff to pay for, right? So that can shift based on every entrepreneur's own need, but then also the goals they have in their personal finance life in addition to their business goals.
It makes the I guess the ending point, a lot where you're shooting for, a lot easier too. I mean, and that has evolved for me over the years. I left my corporate job and I was making like $180,000. So right in my brain right away, I'm like, I'm gonna work so hard that I grow my business to $180,000 a year that I can pay myself, And for so long, I was like, man, this is a lot harder than I thought. I'm like, because I wanted to work less, but I wanted to make more. It's like, okay, pal, yeah, you gotta find a good zone there. And so for the first couple of years of my business, I'm like, okay, make as much as possible, work the hours that are required in order to make as much as money as possible. Outsource a bunch. If that means you have to get employees and all this stuff. And then I was like starting to feel overwhelmed. I'm like, I feel like I'm buying myself a job here. Like this needs to be designed the way that it works best for me. So over the years, I've realized I don't want to have any employees. I really don't. I like working with contractors and people who are also self-employed that want to work at their own leisure and their time and pay them for their expert services. So I work with a lot of contractors to make that possible. But I really don't want to ever have an employee. I really don't. I think that that's part of the freedom that I want to enjoy with my small business. I would like to call it I interviewed Chad Carson recently on my show. He has a new book called The Small and Mighty Real Estate Investor. I want to steal that and say I want to be a small and mighty entrepreneur too. Like I want to keep it small and palatable, and the amount of hours that I'm working per week are manageable and fun, because if it gets too big and too overwhelming, then what's it all for? I don't know.
I really like this concept, and it is in such opposition to the typical like bigger, better, faster, stronger, more hamster wheel. And so I'm curious, how have you been successful at kind of like shutting out that advice? I'm sure people have said like, oh, you're crazy, man. Like you could blow this up to 7 figures. Like, what are you sitting on? So how have you navigated this personal desire and definition even to come up with, hey, you know what? I really like this small. I'm going to keep it here. How did you arrive at that? And then also, how have you kind of put walls around, boundaries around yourself to say, I'm not listening to that advice. It's not for me.
To your point, I do get that a lot. Like, I talk about paying off our mortgage and things like that. And so people hear when, oh, you're going to start a business. Why don't you borrow from the equity of your home? Then you could blow this thing up. You can get 10 employees. I'm like, I don't really want to do that. So part of it for me, which has been a newer thing over the past couple of years, is limiting my exposure to those messages of more. And so for me, that's, podcasts. I like to consume those. Social media is really big because, you get something about the algorithm maybe knows I'm an entrepreneur, feeds me up some of those things. So limiting my exposure to social media, so much so that I'm, deleting all the apps off my phone. I've done that for the past year. It's so funny because I have a social media presence, but I don't have any social media apps on my phone, which helps me personally because it is an addictive thing for me. So I try to limit my exposure to those messages as one step. And then the second step is to increase my exposure to messages that fall in line with time freedom, family first, taking care of your health. Joshua Becker wrote a great book called Things That Matter. Just people like him, messages like that put the more message away and more about quality of life and enjoying the here and now.
So let me ask you something. How do you maintain your social media presence without having all the apps on your phone and without dealing with that? Is it something you outsource? Like, what are your choices there? Because that is a big pain point for entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I've had the fortune to work with an incredible social media agency for the past 3 or 4 years that gets me, that also is flexible with like, here's what I can provide, here's what I can afford essentially for my exposure, and they are fantastic. And so outsourcing has been fantastic. So finding partners that you can know, like, and trust. With anything, you need to have some sort of oversight of what's going up there. We've used a lot of tools that make that process easy. So they're doing a lot of creation on their end, and then they'll share it through another tool called Loomly, that helps me to review those social media ideas, or how they think they can support me with this message that I'm putting out there. And over time, it just gets more accurate because of the continual feedback. In the beginning, it's like, oh, change this 100%, and then a month later, it's 95%, and then a year later, it's 2%. You know what I mean? Like, the more time you spend with people, the more dedication you have, and it also helps to just work with fantastic people. So, shout out to Weird Digital Marketing; they're fantastic, and just having tools to make the process easier, and then partnering with people that can help you along that way. And that's specifically a crutch for me, because I had the apps on my phone. I would find myself scrolling or finding ways to be busy on social media that weren't helping me grow my business. And so by making that change, outsourcing, and then deleting the apps off my phone, it's been majorly helpful for me to move in the direction that I want to go with my business.
Well, thank you for sharing that, because I know you're not alone in those struggles. Most people that I talk to, as far as even just podcasting, one of their questions is, all right, what's the best way to deal with this with social media? Because I'm already overwhelmed. So I'm always looking for a good recommendation there, even if my team's going to handle it, or if I can, refer it to somebody else. So thank you for sharing that. Would you be open to sharing any other pieces of your business that you've outsourced to provide you more free time? Because I know everybody's got questions around that. Like, how on earth does this guy work this few hours and run this podcast and make this much money?
I'd say the magic sauce to that is finding good people who are very talented at what they do, and having the flexibility to work with a up and coming entrepreneur. Obviously, you can hire a big advertising agency or something like that, do all of it, but then you're like, okay, I don't make any money now. So you got to find that balance. So for me, some of the main things that I spend the most money on that are the most helpful, I work with a podcast editor. I work with a YouTube video editor. I work with freelance writers that will help me create content that either goes on my blog or that ends up becoming a video that I create on my YouTube channel. Let's see who else. I work with a thumbnail guy that helps to create the thumbnails on my YouTube channel. I have a virtual assistant who is fantastic that I've been with for the past 9 months now, and she helps keep a lot of the trains running on the small stuff and some of the larger stuff and communication in general. So yeah, I think I just named 5 great individuals that I'm able to partner with that keep it going. Now, obviously with that comes cost. There's lots of costs, and I look at my business budget all the time. I'm like, where's all this money going? Because if I were to look back a couple of years ago, and I would be like, man, I can't believe I'm making this amount of money today, but then I'm also spending quite a bit of money as well. So I always try to make sure that I'm paying myself first, because this isn't for fun. It is for fun. I'm having a good time. But at the end of the day, I want to be able to pay myself some money so that I can continue to live the life that I enjoy at a general, good level. So I always try to put that first, but then making sure that, hey, if I'm saying that I'm going to do all these things, I need to have the support to actually do them, because otherwise I'm cheating my original goal of saying, hey, I got to keep this to 20 to 30 hours a week and pay yourself a decent salary. So it's a balance. Sometimes there's seasons when I'm not making as much, but having that flexibility with freelance workers and contract workers, you can have that type of flexibility. So that being said, though, you don't want to just let somebody go and then 2 months later be like, hey, I got money now, because then they're going to be like, dude, I can't, I need some consistency. So that goes back to the having money in a slush fund so that I don't have to say goodbye to people. I keep that account filled, and in a way that I can keep the team going.
Absolutely. Well, I'll share with you that I operate much in the same way. I am not ready for employees yet. I don't know when or if I will be, but same thing. Like, my contractors have been with me for 4 years, and I really care about them. And I literally feel bad when we have a slower month and I don't have as much work to give them. I've done everything possible, including the slush fund and everything else, to try to, give them any work whatsoever to keep them on and to keep them busy because I care about them. I know they have families to support. They are people. So the choice to have contractors versus employees or vice versa, it still has a very human component to it.
Absolutely.
I think it gets misconstrued sometimes that, like, oh, you don't have employees, like you treat contractors differently or poorly, or like you only need them for when you need them and they're discardable or something like that. And that is just not the way I operate.
I agree. And I try to think of it almost like an employee situation, but without the contract, I guess I would say, is, I'm purposely saving up money each month in my business budget so that I can treat them with a thank you at the end of the year, whether that's a basket of goodies or a gift card or something like that, much in the same way you'd treat a friend that you've been working with all year, trying to keep that amount of money so it stays. And yeah, I mean, sometimes things happen where you've lost a contract or there's revenue down and you're like, I got to make some hard decisions here. But even with that hard decision, I'm talking about like, let me try to transition you down over time as opposed to, done today. And that becomes more jarring because I know that personally, because I've had that happen to me too with clients where it's like, hey, 3 months from now, we don't have budget for you to continue to work with us. Okay, thank you so much. I can plan for that, as opposed to, which I've also had, we're done working with you today. And which one feels more comfortable? So I want to try to be the business owner that provides the comfortable as best as you can. It's not a firm science, but even if it was an employee, I've worked with employees where you can get let go like that, or you can get transitioned out as well. So it's interesting.
And I think it all comes down to who you are as a person and how you want to run your business. Whether you have contractors or employees, you get to choose how you treat them. So I just wanted to highlight that it's refreshing to talk to someone who views it in a similar way that I do. So
thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. I mean, we're all humans, and especially if you're working at a business that talks about how to treat people well and like do kind things and be a good person. It's like, you better live that,
Absolutely. Well, would you share a bit with us about how you've crafted your podcast to continue to market your business? I know that's kind of the accidental way that you started, but then now that it is a business, and I'm sure you've had to get more mindful of how you podcast in time, and whether it's a method or maybe you batch record some episodes, or what do you feel has made you successful with the show for such a long period of time?
My first reaction is like, I guess I'd have to ask if people are listening to it still. But I guess what they would say, and I do survey them once a year, and I also have a online free community where we can connect. I would say consistency is a great thing because because I like to have some sort of fixed reason to say, hey, when those weeks when you're like, oh man, I don't know if I can get this stuff done. I like having okay, you know what? Somebody's going to be picking up their phone on Monday and they're excited about listening to what's going on. So maybe it's not going to be, the exact episode that you had planned, but like, what can you do? And so having fixed deadlines to make sure that I produce the content, I put it out there, and it's helpful. It's good. It's a good feeling. It's a good purpose. I feel like I have a good purpose. Having those fixed deadlines can really help me out. I mean, I've been doing the show for 7 years now, and I have not missed a Monday in 7 years. So, but I'd like to give myself breaks too. So this was a really good piece of advice that I got from my friend Jen Smith, who does Frugal Friends podcast, a great podcast to check out, everybody. She mentioned, hey, every once in a while, if you need a little break, do like a best of episode. You got so much great content, like take a week off, but don't, if somebody still wants to enjoy it, like bring out the best ones. And so I've been doing that for the past couple of years and experimenting with, what those episodes are and how do I highlight some things that maybe are still important today that we talked about a few years ago. So taking those times to relax, but also keep that consistency is a nice hack that I like to do that I learned from my friend Jen. So
That's what I was thinking, is somebody's going to go to your website, check you out, and go, holy cow, look how long this show has been running. How did this guy do this? And he hasn't missed a Monday. And, they might pick out these different things. And that's what everybody is thinking about and kind of afraid of when they are already this busy business owner thinking about creating a podcast to market my business. Sounds great, right? The idea of automatic leads and building an audience and a community over time sounds great. But how do I do that with what I'm already doing? And how do I possibly stay consistent for 7 years? Like, everybody is probably like mind blown at that.
In the beginning, I think I thought of the podcast as the business. And I think that was I don't know. I think there's positives and negatives to that. Since I thought it was the business, I did so much work on it to making it great so that people would sponsor it. But over time, I'm like, okay, you can probably actually make more money from your products or services that you're selling as the business. And so I'm sort of in a hybrid mode right now as I've talked about my different, pieces of revenue that I have, and I don't mind it. I will use my advertising slots for advertisers that I know, like, and trust, or I'm like, hey, this is a season when I want to pump my new course that I've got coming out about how to make your kid a millionaire. So I'm going to take my advertising slots from my podcast and put that in there because Andy's selling today. Andy's talking about a product or service that he has. Or I just use it for my coaching. I'll just say when there's a season where I'm like, hey, I want to book up some slots to make sure that I'm, helping people with their family finances. I love coaching because I feel like connecting with real people with their real, challenges is so much better than me just pontificating on, oh, here's what I think. It's like, it's just better. It's better. So there'll be seasons when I put that as my pre-roll and my mid-roll where I say, hey, I'd love to connect with you. I'd love to help you on your journey. Book a time with me here. And I try to make that process as easy as possible. So I alternate in between my podcast is the business or my podcast is a marketing medium for my business. So not everybody, can create a podcast and get the advertising revenue from it, which is just okay, by the way. Like, it's not like, hey, you can. I'm sure Joe Rogan's doing great, but for the rest of us, it's a helpful amount of money that will help you to move in the direction you want to go with your business.
Thank you for sharing that, because I still kind of fight the narrative that to have a podcast, that means, oh, I'm looking for sponsors, because that's not the only way to monetize a show. And for business owners,
it's a lot harder.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you already own a business, the way to quote unquote monetize your show would be through your own products and services. And those are my ideal clients, right? So nevertheless, though, someone starts talking to me about their podcast and they're like, okay, well, how do we get sponsors? And I'm like, well, let's talk about your business. So, but I think there is a mental block there with a lot of people where they literally just don't understand or don't think that it's possible to create their own commercial in their show. That's like a, yeah, again, like a mind-blowing idea. And once they do it or once they hear it done, it's all clear. And oh my gosh, why haven't I been doing that? Right? So again, I'm going to encourage people to go listen to your show, because I bet you've got some episodes in there where you are marketing your services, but they could also hear some of your sponsors.
Absolutely. And if you have a dynamic podcast too, you can pop those in as you need them too. And so when there's a season where I'm like, I'd like to fill up some slots, I throw it in there for a period of time. And then when I'm done, I just take it out and it's not on those podcast episodes anymore. So I love dynamic advertising for that as well.
Tell us more about that. I know what you're talking
Yeah.
about, but I don't think
Sure.
all.
Was that too jargony? Sorry.
No, that's okay. And this is a somewhat new concept to the
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
industry.
I love it. Yeah.
So since you use
Yeah.
it and you're experienced with it, I'm gonna let you explain it, just
Sounds
so
good.
that people aren't like, what is dynamic advertising on your podcast? Like, what in the world?
For the first 5 years of having my podcast, I did baked in advertising. So this was me getting a podcast sponsor, let's say, I don't know, but generic podcast sponsor. I'm not going to name somebody.
Some mattress or something.
Yeah, mattress. There you go. There's lots of mattresses out there. So for the first 15 seconds, I would do a pre-roll for said mattress company. Do you like sleeping? Oh, great. Get this mattress. And then I'd do a lot of show. And then in the middle, I would do a mid-roll for that, where you talk a lot about the mattress a little bit more. So for the first 5 years, that was baked in to the ad. I actually recorded it. It was a part of the episode. What has recently come out is called dynamic advertising. So you can place in the ad when and where you want it across all of your shows, or just some of your shows that you say, hey, I'd only like this ad to be featured to people who live in Alabama from this period of time to this period of time. That's cool, right? So then it's specific. And so that helps you get more advertisers. That helps you to be more specific with your ads. And it also helps you not waste people's time. You know, sometimes I think I had an ad for some, it was Empower, and I'm like, hey, if you sign up by the end of this month, you get a gift card, August 2020. And it's like, how irrelevant is that to everybody listening in 2024? Because I create evergreen content. So people will come back and listen to something 3 years ago, but like the ad in there is useless. So with dynamic advertising, you can just dynamically change what's in your advertising spots and do it based on what's important to you right now, which sponsors are sponsoring your show, or like to your point, what services are you talking about right now that are most important? You know, we've got a sale going on right now with our XYZ service or product, and it ends at the end of this month. And then when it ends at the end of this month, you don't have it on there anymore, which is great. So I love it. It's changed my business. And it makes it a lot more fun. It just makes it brings it to, I don't know, it's very new.
Absolutely. It's like customizable to the timing and products and services or sponsors that you want listeners to hear at the time you want them to hear it. So I love that you said it doesn't waste their time.
I'll even do it to create community too. Like, hey, I'm going to be in Chicago for a conference. You want to meet up? And so I'll do meetups.
Yeah.
And then it'll only be on there for a week for people who live in Chicago. And then it'll be off.
Perfect.
You know, it's like, that's a fun way to connect with people.
That is really fun. I know that people who aren't in the podcasting space, either as podcasters or production, they don't know about these features. And yes, there are a lot of things about the industry that's a little bit antiquated, but there are some new cool features like this that are much more widely available and easier to use than they ever were before. One new feature I've been experimenting with is like Spotify video, and, you know, things like dynamic ads. There are a few little features here and there that, if you are open to experimentation, and just like you would in your business, right? Okay, let's see if this product hits. Let's see if this service, do my people want XYZ? And you're experimenting and pivoting within your business. Treat your marketing the same way, because none of these things should be stagnant.
Absolutely. Yeah. Pivoting where you see the happenings happening, giving it a try, see if you get something that you want to do. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Completely agree.
So are there any pieces of software or tools or anything really tangible that you might want to share that have made a big difference in your business?
Well, I guess top of mind would be what we were just talking about, and that would be Megaphone with regard to podcast hosting, and then the use of dynamic ads. It's got a great system. They're continuing to update it over time. It's owned by Spotify, so you're part of the Spotify network if you get to be a part of it, which is nice. And they'll do, if you don't have an advertiser and you want Spotify to just advertise on there, you can click what you like to not advertise for, which I have a lot of things that I unadvertise for. But most of the time when I listen to it, I'm like, yeah, if I had the opportunity to work with Fidelity, then I probably would have had them as a sponsor. But they have a better connection. So I really like Megaphone as far as connecting with all of these contractors that I mentioned. I absolutely love Asana. Like, I am in love with it. It helps me for free. It helps me manage so much that I have going on, and I don't want them to hear this and ruin my free day. I can't believe it's free, and it just blows my mind of how much I'm able to control in there, and then make processes happen, and the ability for it to repeat tasks for myself or for other people that I work with. It's revolutionized my business and helps me stay within that 20 to 30 hours that I talked about of my work week. So I would highly recommend Asana. Those are two that pop up in my brain.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing those. Because I know people are always looking for, better organizational tools, things.
Yeah, Asana would be that for me.
Exactly. And we use that in our business as well. So this is funny because I invited you on, but I did not know that we ran our businesses so similarly. So I'm like, oh my gosh.
Well, a lot of this comes from just, conversations with like-minded people too. I didn't know about a lot of this stuff until I asked a lot of questions, and through conversations like this, this is the way people learn. I mean, connecting with real people, because we all go on Google and be like, what's the best thing to do, whatever. And it's like, overwhelm, it's like too many things, right? Going to conferences, connecting with people who are in a similar industry as you, learning what they do, people that you respect, you could be like, hey, how do you do that? And people always love talking about things that they do that they think they're smart at. It's like, it's an easy question. It's like, how do you do what you do? Oh, well, then they open up, and it's great. So, it's part of the reason to have a podcast, to really invite people on that you that you admire and then you want to learn from, because people love talking about things that they've done well.
Yeah, and if they faced a challenge and did all the work to figure it out, they are vying to tell you the solution that they found. So anything you want to share that's coming up this summer or this fall about your business, something that we can look forward to?
Yeah, I talk about entrepreneurship sometimes. The area that I focus a lot about with regard to entrepreneurship is trying to seek out part-time work that is, within that 20 to 30 hour per week, because I feel like there is so much life that we need to be living outside of work. So I try to share some of that content, a lot of my channels. And so you can find a lot of that at marriagekidsandmoney.com. Podcast. We have a YouTube channel. We have a blog. One thing that I'm passionate about right now in this stage of life that I'm in, because I feel so honestly happy with my life, it's like, okay, how can I help my kids in the exact same way? So my platform is called Marriage, Kids, and Money. And so I'm focused a lot about generational wealth right now. So, and a lot of that comes from knowledge. And then you use that knowledge to help build your wealth. So I've created a course called Make My Kid a Millionaire. And it's 10 steps to help your children build generational wealth and happiness. And I think happiness is a big part of it too. So you can learn more about that at marriagekidsandmoney.com/course.
That sounds amazing. And I will share that I've done some steps that I'm assuming they're in your course, but then now I'm like, ooh, I should go take Andy's course. Because I tell my kids all the time, like, here's your investment account. And you're this old, and here's your money, and like, look how much you earned this year. So what did you do for this money this year? And they're like, nothing. Exactly. And here is
the best epiphany.
So then, okay, so you're this old, and let's just pretend, we're going to map you out until you're 60. And if you never invest again, this is how much is going to be in this account. And their minds are blown by this big number that's on the screen, right? And then I'll show them my account and say, if I don't invest anymore, and then I'm 60, this is how much I will have. And they go, oh, I'm so sorry for you. And I'm like, you know what? Like,
so they're getting the wealth.
Yeah. So, and all the numbers are good numbers, right? But it is amazing to see the wheels start to turn in their minds. And I cracked up as well when they said, "Oh, I feel so sorry for you." I'm like, "Mommy's going to be okay. Like, I'm going to be super happy." But what I'm showing you is the power of your age and being able to invest. And, so I'm walking through the lesson and I'm telling them, I didn't figure this out when I was young enough, right? Like, my parents didn't know to tell me. My parents didn't have the ability to show me. I don't even think they were investing. So we are doing things differently. So I'm sure that's a similar conversation. And
I love that you're having those conversations with your kids, because honestly, that's the special sauce, is just talking about this more. I mean, you and I have had a great conversation today and we learned a lot from each other. That's the special sauce. If we don't talk about it with our kids and we don't show them the path, then yeah, they're not gonna have a lot of that knowledge. But I like your thought about retirement in general too. It's like, if we're able to create jobs right now or businesses that we love so much, that feel so good, that we know we're helping people, the idea of retirement in the future kind of changes too. It's like, I can see myself doing this until the internet shuts off,
yeah.
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 So building a business is incredible, especially one that you are excited about waking up on Monday morning to do. So,
Well, and I think going back to the kids' wealth thing, we have the ability as entrepreneurs to make decisions in our business that if you're a W-2 employee, you do not have those same choices.
that is so true.
It's a huge wealth building opportunity, generational wealth building opportunities.
I have 2 podcast hosts that are 12 years old and 9 years old, and their Roth IRAs are getting filled up. So
Yes, I absolutely love that. Thank you so much for sharing.
absolutely.
Everything that you did with us today. Everybody go check out Andy's show and the course. Who doesn't want their kid to be a millionaire? I mean,
There you go. Catchy name, right?
It does. Yeah, absolutely. But yes, thank you so much, Andy. I really appreciate this.
Thank you for having me, Virginia.
Absolutely.